xenobiologist from the Tyranu Confederacy, had been performing non-invasive biopreservation on a species that was classified as Homo sapiens. Through the correct diplomatic and ethical channels, his laboratory circling Ganymede had received shipments of regulated human biological samples, mainly blood, plasma, and, once under strict conditions, a small portion of donor skin for histocompatibility examination. There was no reason for him to anticipate danger. Even though the environment was sterile, the samples were inert, and the procedure was carefully followed. The containment alarms continued to sound. The secondary venting sequence activated. During a calm shift cycle when he was employing the human T cells to create a comparative antigen response model. In his field of study, more than 42% of the protein cultures had been killed. The response was not just forceful, but outrageous by Toronto's standards. Everything had been targeted by the human cells, including seemingly innocuous carrier molecules that ought to have gone undetected. The human immune system fought a battle, not just a defense. Drill, Ver's helper, glided towards him, his vent fronds flaring in fright and his eyes wide as Dran exclaimed. It eradicated the control medium and the reserve buffer, all of it. Pharaoh blinked. The T-cell line from Subject 41A, it recognized. Our proteins not just as non-native, but as hostile. It incinerated them at the cellular level. It's like it panicked. They gazed at the data on cytotoxicity that was moving across the screen. The cells were not in a panic. Like a little army being told to kill, they had reacted with frightening coordination. There was nothing else to do. He had to talk to someone, wearing a sterile patient uniform. Jackson Price sat calmly in the Ganymede Visitor Medical Annex, looking tiredly at the equipment. Unless curiosity was involved, he wasn't ill. It had been an odd but alluring offer. A quick visit to a safe extraterrestrial laboratory to talk about a biological oddity in humans. After receiving medical clearance, vaccinations, and a thorough briefing, he was transported to the orbiting lab in a heavily insulated shuttle. He was now waiting for an extraterrestrial physician to question him about the reason for his blood's outburst. Tentacles relaxed in the non-combat position that humans had been taught to identify. Ver moved slowly, and Jackson's gaze followed. Him like a hawk, though. Mr. Price, Viva said, using a translation node to filter his voice. Jackson arched an eyebrow and said, Your immune profile has presented a significant issue. You make it sound like I hacked your servers. You might have biologically. Your T-cells recognized our inert substrates as threats. Not mild threats, mortal enemies. Well, yeah, leaned back, Jackson answered, before rendering it in Tyranu. The translator paused to consider the statement, We don't like invaders. Ver jerked. Jackson crossed his arms and said, But they weren't invaders. They were neutral, non-harmful. Our immune system doesn't guess. If it doesn't match, it gets flagged. No second chances. Ver displayed a screen. Do you see this? These are your memory T-cells from a single small sample trained only by your natural environment. We didn't introduce any pathogens. Still, your cells identified over 700 of our proteins as targets. Unimpressed, Jackson took a quick look at the statistics. That tracks. Why would your biology be this aggressive? Most species adapt to a certain tolerance for environmental anomalies. Jackson's laughter wasn't sarcastic, it was dry. Yeah, we don't have that luxury. The world tried to kill us every week for about 2 million years. We adapted. Ver leaned a little forward. But this is an adaptation. It's xenophobia on a cellular level. Jackson gave a shrug. Call it what you want. Evolution wrote the rules. We just inherited the paranoia. Ver demanded further examinations. They conducted an in-lab histocompatibility test with Jackson's permission. It only involved exposing a skin sample to a sealed array and simulating foreign proteins. It was not invasive. In just a few hours, Jackson's cells produced a storm so strong that half of the lab's air filters were turned off by the containment bots. Once they described the magnitude of response, it still shocked everyone, including Jackson. A real immune response like that in a full system could cause fever, shock, organ failure. But this was just a simulated environment. While he saw the news, he questioned, "You're saying my cells did that?" "Not all your cells. Your T helper cells coordinated the attack. Your cytotoxic T cells did most of the actual destruction, but your B cells joined in too. Even in vitro, they produced antibodies in record time." With genuine distress, Jackson questioned, "And this was with no real infection? Now add basic alien protein to the culture." "It was harmless." Leaning forward with his elbows resting on the sterilized table, Jackson let out a breath. "All right, that's not normal. It's not something we think about." Ver paused. "Do you realize this makes you biologically dangerous to most other life forms?" "Risky." Jackson said it again. "I remained in the room the entire time. You are not required to. Your cells are prepared to defend you in advance. Your species has microscopic weapons." "Well," mumbled Jackson, "our planet's germs also never played nice." Jackson started exhibiting symptoms of a mild allergic reaction to the air filters 2 days later. A dozen interlocking systems controlled, sterilized, and filtered the environment. Jackson's immune system, however, was unconcerned. By the end of the second day, he had a slight fever, itchy skin, and nasal discomfort. Ver was horrified. Surroundings are completely neutral. It was triggered by something. Jackson wiped his nose and grumbled. "The air blend, most likely. In your filters, do you guys utilize trace sulfur? Trace components inside secure bounds. You're safe." They changed the filters. Although there was a slight improvement in the symptoms, new questions were raised. Ver requested authorization to take real-time pictures of Jackson's immune cells while he was exposed. Even Jackson was terrified by what they witnessed, but he cooperated primarily out of morbid curiosity. His immune cells activated in a matter of minutes after being exposed to a non-native protein fragment, such as that present in innocuous alien pollen. Active assault signaling in addition to identification. "You understand that you're allergic to things that no other species would even recognize," Ver explained thoughtfully. Jackson gave a headshake. "Doctor, we have persons who are allergic to peanuts." "Peanuts? You realize how ridiculous that is? Everything, including food, is suspicious to our biology." Ver had a comprehensive immunological map of Jackson's reaction spectrum by the end of the first week. He referred to it as a state of hyperactive observation. Each foreign molecule was viewed as a possible danger, and if the immune system had enough time, it would intensify until the invader was either eliminated or the organism collapsed. At their subsequent debriefing, Ver stated, "This is a flaw. Even when there is very little risk, your body attacks. The expense of inflammation alone is enormous." Jackson appeared worn out. "If it weren't for that problem, we probably wouldn't have progressed this far." "I admire your resilience," Ver said. "However, it is harmful and careless." Jackson gave a nod. "Do you know what sepsis is?" Ver gave a headshake. It occurs when your immune system overreacts to the point of death. Even though we now have medication to treat it, it still occurs. Comparable to a neurotic security guard brandishing a flamethrower is our immune system. A protracted hush ensued. Why would evolution select for this? Ver eventually asked. Leaning back, Jackson's gaze wandered to the shuttered viewing screen overlooking Jupiter. Because it wasn't just viruses or bacteria. Predators, fungus, and parasites were involved. We only had fists and intelligence. We lacked poison and claws. Therefore, every cell in our body becomes a bouncer due to our biology. We picked everything up quickly. It doesn't endure if it doesn't belong. Ver's body tensed. He returned his attention to the screen, where a fresh batch of inert chemicals was already being listed as threats by human immune cells. We need to rewrite our containment protocols, he remarked in a low voice. Jackson, still stifled, gave a half smile. Welcome to the club. Ver Station's medical bay was designed for diagnostic peace and quiet, not biohazard situations. However, it now contained the quadrant's most erratic immune system, a protein-based antiseptic used in Tyranu surface sanitation had caused Jackson to have hives along his neck. He had indirectly come into contact with a single nanog during a maintenance droid's cleaning of the hallway. Jackson murmured, I didn't even touch the wall, as red spots began to appear beneath his collar. Ver remarked, you didn't need to, while using a multi-spectrum bioscanner to examine the allergic reaction. Jackson frowned as he straightened his posture and said, your system is primed for minimal thresholds. Most species require sustained exposure to sensitize. We adapt fast, sometimes too fast. We've updated containment again. You'll be transferred to a fully human, space-like environment. Already your leukocytes began reacting within 6 minutes of exposure. The local epidermal tissue produced histamines at 10 times the usual rate. Jackson examined the skin wheals. You'd think by now it would know I'm not trying to kill myself. Your immune system cannot think, Ver said, but it assumes the worst. Exactly. By the second week, the lab's environmental sphere had been reconstructed into a microhabitat tailored to Earth-based physiology. The walls were coated in inert polymers. The oxygen mix calibrated to within 2% of Earth's sea level norms, and the internal food system replaced by pre-approved terrestrial rations. Still, Jackson's immune system remained on high alert. His eosinophils spiked in the presence of even synthetic bedding fibers. Ver looked at the readouts in disbelief. Jackson scraped at his arm and said, it's synthetic, biologically inert. Synthetic doesn't mean invisible. We've got people allergic to latex. Plastic gloves can cause rashes. Bear was staring at him. Jackson's rash went away after receiving no treatment, but the underlying message had been understood. Do you know how statistically improbable that is? Sure, but not impossible. The bedding was replaced with sterile cotton from a Martian hydrodome grown from Earth's seed stock. His body had no faith in anyone. The investigation was enlarged. By Ver with Jackson's approval. This time, they ran complete immunotyping panels on daily blood samples. The outcomes were incredibly intricate. Jackson's immunological indicators changed in response to slight changes in his serotype. Measurable alterations in neutrophil counts and cytokine levels were brought on by a small stressor, including interrupted sleep. Ver had created a chart that showed the immunological variety of 70 sentient species. Under baseline settings, the majority fell within a 5% variance range. In just 12 hours, Jackson's baseline shifted by as much as 23%. Ver remarked, "I've never seen this in a healthy subject," while examining the readings. Jackson blinked. "I'm still considered healthy." "Technically, yes, but your system functions like it's under siege." "I'm not surprised. I spent 3 weeks in the Andes once. Got altitude sickness, dysentery, 2 different infections. I didn't get treatment until the end." "You recovered without hospitalization." "I almost didn't." Ver modified his translator delay a bit. Jackson grinned sarcastically and said, "You have survived things that would incapacitate other species. That's our brand." On day 19, there was a minor error in judgment. A micropump on the nutrient supplement delivery system was misprogrammed by Drill V's assistant. It introduced a low-mass molecule that was frequently employed in Confederate food processing, a carrier protein used in Tyranonian nutritious additives. It was a negligible sum. Jackson had face flushing, nausea, and cramps in his abdomen within 20 minutes. His blood pressure fell. Ver got there just as earlier stage anaphylaxis was beginning. Jackson screamed, "Administer epinephrine." After a moment of hesitation, Ver hurried to the designated compartment and said, "Top drawer." As it dug into Jackson's leg, the injector hissed. Over the next few minutes, his pulse returned to normal and his respiration gradually stabilized. Bear remarked, "You knew exactly what was happening." Bear looked at the log and said, "It's the second time that's happened to me. The first time was shellfish. 94% of our client species did not react with the Tyranu meal protein molecule." The faint rasp of Jackson's respiration persisted. He was sent to medical observation. "I'm one of the other 6. I thought it was a mistake, but my body doesn't care." For 2 hours, his throat remained somewhat swelled. According to human medical standards, he was given corticosteroids and antihistamines. Jackson insisted on recording the incident himself, although there was no lasting harm. Uncharacteristically silent, Ver stood by. Finally, Ver stated, "I used to think hypersensitivity was rare. It's not simply allergies among us. We also have autoimmunity. Your own cells are attacked by your system. Rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and type 1 diabetes are illnesses where the immune system goes awry when something in you changes too much or appears suspect. That is extremely hostile. It undermines itself." Jackson's face was pallid but on the mend as he rested against the medbay wall. "It is watchful and occasionally overly enthusiastic, but we wouldn't survive childhood without that." Ver gazed at him. "Is this typical?" "In different proportions. Some people's systems are mild. However, defense is ingrained in every human being. Our code contains it." Ver finished a comprehensive, systemic mapping of Jackson's immunological genes by day 26. A Confederate Biological Ethics Board was taken aback by the report. In stations with mixed environments, they inquired as to whether human immune systems were a diplomatic concern. "Perhaps," Veredhead replied, "but only in the context of direct fluid exchange or biological integration." At that, Jackson arched an eyebrow. "Do you mean mating or blood transfusions?" Jackson's water almost choked him. Noted limited cohabitation protocols were suggested by the Council. Environmental sterilization devices that can isolate immunogenic particles are necessary in any shared space between humans and non-human living forms. Additionally, they advised thorough immunological testing before to any human long-term proximity deployments. In bureaucratic terms, it meant that humans are dangerous up close. Jackson asked for a copy of his whole immunology profile. On day 30, He read it silently for an hour. "This says I've developed minor reactivity to 6 of your cleaning agents," he stated. "Yes, and to your synthetic wall polymer. Yes." Jackson let out a sigh. "I've just spent a month here." Bear gave a nod. "In that period, your body has produced more than 97 new antibodies." Jackson appeared truly shaken. "That's quick. Your defenses are changing in real time." He murmured, "We don't even have a vaccine for the common cold." Ver said, "You don't need one. Your own weapons factory is you, Jackson." Woke up 3 days later with enlarged lymph nodes under both arms and a low-grade fever. Interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein levels increased, according to blood testing. His own muscle protein had triggered an immunological response. "The autoimmune flare," Jackson said softly. "Indeed, prolonged exposure to non-Earth conditions may have caused it." He was started on immunosuppressants right away. Ver checked the most recent clinical standards on Earth. Although cautious, the choice was essential. Jackson's immune system, which was already on high alert, seemed to have gone too far and started attacking itself. He rested for the next 2 days. The drug was helpful. He became cold. The edema subsided. According to Jackson, this happens to other humans, too, on the 3rd day. "We call them flares. Sometimes it's random. Sometimes stress. Sometimes a trigger we can't even find." Ver sighed. Jackson nodded feebly and said, "Your immune system burns so bright it begins to consume itself." Bear looked at him in complete shock as he said, "Sometimes, but we fight it always. You live with a system that can turn on you at any time and still go hiking." Jackson gradually recovered from the autoimmune crisis by the end of week 5. His joints still hurt sometimes, and he was still feeble. He walked more slowly. His vitals revealed minor inflammation that persisted. "This will take weeks to resolve," Ver stated. "I know," answered Jackson. "Flare-ups don't vanish overnight. Do you wish to return to Earth? Not yet. You could have died." "I know that too." Ver couldn't comprehend. "Then why stay?" Jackson asked with a little smile. "Because if you want to understand humans, you have to see how we endure. Not just when things go well, especially when they don't." Ver took in the sentence. He glanced at the most recent set of data. Jackson's B cells have started to produce fewer antibodies. Slowly, his indicators stabilized. He wouldn't be fully recovered for weeks. However, he was already assisting with data logging once more. Ver had previously encountered militaristic, reactionary animals that were warlike. This, however, was not the same. This was something more profound, cellular. Disobedience, biological stubbornness. It was lovely in its own right. Ver's orbital lab had more protocols pertaining to Jackson's biology by the 6th week than any other species in the Confederacy's entire Xenomedical Archive, segregated food processing zones, duplicate decontamination chambers, and several atmospheric checkpoints, yet it was still insufficient. Jackson passed unconscious while inspecting the atmospheric regulator chamber at the station. In less than 5 minutes, his vitals collapsed. His skin turned pale, his breathing became short, and his blood pressure was illegible with regular tour equipment. Alert for an emergency, Ver hurried into the room. Jackson's eyes were barely open as he lay limp next to the pressure panel. His limbs pulsed with a little tremor. After transferring him to the reinforced isolation medbay and stabilizing him with human manual for fluids, they started thorough diagnostic workups. When Jackson's pulse stabilized, He murmured hoarsely. What happened? A tiny chemical residue left by a maintenance drone triggered a severe immune shock response in Ver stated. What kind of chemical? Trinisyl-13, used as sterilus coolants. Not, by our standards, biologically active. Jackson averted his gaze, his eyes watery. My body had a different idea. It poured inflammatory indicators into your blood. Acute systemic inflammation struck you. For what duration was I absent? 9 minutes. Jackson remained silent. He closed his eyes and reclined. Ver kept an eye on the drip rate and carefully thought what he would say next. Your immune system does not merely defend, Ver stated. It anticipates, preempts, but it does not forgive. Sometimes it punishes me for attempting to live, and Jackson's head twisted. Slowly, for 2 whole days, they kept him under observation. His muscles were still sore, but the inflammation subsided. It would take time to recover. Ver asked to show Jackson a holographic comparative model while he was recuperating. Average immune response latencies for all Confederacy living forms were mapped. The majority of species respond 8 to 12 hours after exposure. As Jackson examined the model, Ver clarified, yours initiates response within minutes, sometimes seconds. You're saying it's faster. Not just faster, indiscriminately. Faster. And the strength of the response is unmatched. No species we've studied has this level of inflammatory magnitude. Jackson didn't say anything. This cannot continue, Ver said. Tell our ancestors that. I'm going to tell you, Jackson scowled. Ver said softly, you are not your ancestors. Furthermore, this is not Earth. You no longer have to be at war. Jackson gave a headshake. It doesn't operate that way. The defenses that evolution bestowed upon us are not up to us to decide. We are unable to turn it off. According to Ver, we need to learn how to work with your defenses because they won't work with us unless we have a thorough understanding of them. They started a fresh series of research that was more concerned with regulation than reaction. Because human immunological control was not centralized, other species have a far lower understanding of it. No off switch was present. Rather, there were dozens of chemical moderators, cellular signaling cascades, and feedback loops. They used Jackson's T-regulatory cells to do simulations. Suppression patterns only became active after damage had started. According to Ver, the human body seemed to choose overreaction first, then tidy up the mess afterwards. Ver mumbled, you react first, think later. According to Jackson, we have a saying like that. It turns out that this is also true at the cellular level. The research lasted for 10 days. Jackson was steady but wary. He donned a Confederacy, specially designed portable allergy analyzer. It occasionally detected molecules no bigger than dust and beeped when possible hazards were in the area. He held it up and remarked, I feel like a canary in a mine as it beeps softly close to a fresh delivery of wall panels. Fear stated, you are not expendable, without contesting. However, the information they acquired was priceless. It demonstrated that immunological suppression in humans has to be earned. The body needed to be persuaded of tranquility. It didn't just happen. Tolerance is learnt. Very summarized. That explains much. Explains our social behavior, too, said Jackson. We don't default to trust, we build it. Day 53. For a formal evaluation, a representative of the Confederacy's Medical Ethics Committee flew into orbit. She was a tall, stubby biologist from the colonies of Kalinari. Viz Ren was her name, and she appeared quite appalled by the short report. During the review session, she stated, "Your body reacts violently to stimuli so minute our biosensors barely detect them." Jackson had a warm pack on his knee as he sat across the table. An earlier injury, perhaps from strain, flared up again. "Yeah, sorry about that." When V said, "You are not at fault, but we must reassess all protocols for human-adjacent assignments." Very nodded agreed. "Cohabitation without proper regulation is unsafe. We've always known our biology was overzealous," shared Jackson. V cocked his head and said, "We just didn't realize how alone we were in that. You are not alone, but your biology is a fortress." Jackson gave a small smile. "We had to be." The next week, they skipped a day of testing. Jackson continued to advance slowly. His joints were swollen and his energy was low due to the autoimmune flare. Ver had to reevaluate all of his presumptions about how resilient people are. Resilience meant perseverance in the face of fatigue, not merely strength. Jackson didn't recover right away, but he kept trying. Jackson gazed at Earth, a dim blue dot next to the gas giant, through the station viewport that night. He asked, "You know what's wild? What lab? We've had people survive rabies. That's a virus that eats the brain, I know. Some guy survived a brain parasite and meningitis. Took months in a coma. He walks now with a cane." Ver hesitated. "You share stories like that often. They matter. They terrify me." Jackson grinned. "Good, they should." Jackson woke up coughing late that evening. Not severely, but enough to warrant a re-examination of the inflammation in his airways. A few minutes later, Ver showed up with a data pad. "I have been reviewing data from your earliest samples," Ver stated while checking Jackson's vital signs. "Your immune cells carry memory, signatures from hundreds of prior exposures, probably from travel. I've worked on 3 continents. You encountered over 60 distinct viral strains before age 30. Seems about right." Ver pondered the readings. Jackson chuckled softly. "You should not be alive." Ver recorded the vitals, saying, "We keep hearing that. Still here. You are stabilizing." Again, good. "Because next time I want to help you test something." Ver's eyebrows went up. "What?" "I want to see if I can train my immune system here like we do with allergy shots back home. Lotus exposure. Build tolerance. Step by step." Ver gazed at him. "You wish to tame it?" "No," Jackson replied. Ver nodded after continuing to stare. "I want to trust this place. I will help you try." On day 61, the desensitization procedure started. It wasn't spontaneous. Through diplomatic transmission, Ver collaborated with Earth immunologists, comparing desensitization techniques employed in tolerance, induction, and allergy immunotherapy. Measuring exposure was the aim. Only carefully chosen non-native proteins. At subthreshold concentrations, no known triggers or high-risk antigens. Jackson agreed. He had 2 briefings and was observed at every stage. An manufactured analog of a frequent Tyranu environmental component. They started with a single molecule that was entirely inactive and not even detectable by human scent. 1 part per billion was vaporized and added to a sealed chamber. Jackson spent 5 minutes sitting in that room. He responded, nothing happened. Good start, when Ver dismissed him. They repeated the same action the following day. Slowly, the concentration rose. Although it varied, Jackson's immunological reaction never became more severe. His eosinophil count increased once before declining. Again, his pulse rate remained constant. Ver recorded all of the data points. He reverently went over Jackson's immune system's chemical cascade, seeing how regulation overtook reaction. Day 72. This is working, Ver stated. You are adapting, said Jackson. Feels like we're negotiating a ceasefire. You are rewriting your own biological priorities. By the end of week 11, Jackson was able to stand in a room with trace amounts of previously reactive chemicals without experiencing any symptoms. Can't say I've ever done that before. No fever, no inflammation, no hives. His immune system had learned prudence, but it had not shut down. Almost out of breath, Ver questioned, "Do you understand what this means?" "What?" Jackson said. "I can." "Finally, use your soap." Ver didn't laugh, but his relief was obvious. The Confederacy sent observers from 3 member species to witness the final tolerance assessment. It wasn't a spectacle, just a quiet exposure trial with a panel of carefully curated environmental markers from the station. Jackson stood in the middle of the sterile testing bay. Ver initiated the air circulation. The compounds were introduced. 5 minutes, 10, 20. Jackson coughed once, a dry tickle, then nothing. Sensors showed minor immune activation. The usual suspects, interleukins, histamines, a gentle cytokine pulse, but all within manageable thresholds. Nothing flared, nothing panicked. After 30 minutes, Ver stepped into the room with him. Jackson gave a tired smile. "That's a pass, right?" Bear nodded. "It is." The observer sent confirmation to the council. Clearance for extended human Confederacy integration was approved under the new Jackson parameters. "You've been made protocol," Farah told him. "Great. Am I going to receive a plaque or something? A sandwich is given to you. No allergens." Jackson didn't leave the station. Right away. He stayed to assist with the translation of human immunological training into a model for interspecies medicine. Not just treatments, but expectations. Most species think of immune defense like an on-off switch. Jackson explained during a shared interspecies seminar. Ours is more like a high-strung home alarm system. It activates if a squirrel walks past the driveway. There was laughter, genuine, though some of the species required translator delay to catch the humor. Ver watched as Jackson described histamine reactions using metaphors, like faulty fire sprinklers and autoimmune syndromes as the biological equivalent of friendly fire. But he never downplayed it, not once. When asked what humans feared most about their own biology, Jackson said that it stops protecting us and starts attacking us, that we turn against ourselves. There was a quiet pause afterward. Monver added, "But even then, they fight to correct it." The station's new medical wing opened 3 weeks later. It included a human-competent quarantine module. Not because humans were unwelcome, but because they were finally understood. Jackson stood at the viewing panel overlooking the bay. A new human researcher had arrived the day before. Dr. Lena Morris, immunogeneticist, early 30s, with a massive duff of earth-grown snacks and a full allergy dossier already uploaded to station systems. "She's good," Jackson said, watching her run her first diagnostic scan. Ver floated beside him. "And safer now, thanks to you. I just reacted. My immune system did the heavy lifting. Your patience did, and your willingness to suffer discomfort. For understanding, are you saying that I'm a good patient?" Jackson asked, glancing at him. "I'm saying you endured things most wouldn't, because curiosity was stronger than fear." With a laugh, Jackson said, "May I quote you? Only if you also quote your line about the flamethrower security guard. Deal?" On day 103, Jackson left the station without incident. There were no flare-ups, allergic reactions, or violations of protocol. He walked without stiffness, his joints were no longer hurting, his skin was clear, his eyes were alert. The patient, methodical recuperation had paid off. Ver gave him a little packet before he boarded the shuttle, containing a polymer square, the synthetic wall compound that had set off one of his first responses. According to Ver, you can handle it now, then. He placed it inside his duffel bag after turning it in his hand. I'll keep it, Jackson replied, a reminder of where we started. Ver paused. Are you going to come back? Yeah, I think I will. But next time, I'm bringing better snacks, Jackson said. Glancing out at the stars outside the shuttle bay, you have given your approval. The shuttle door closed behind Jackson, and Ver turned back towards the lab, already thinking about the next paper he'd write. Immunological trust, adaptive coexistence in high-response mammalian biology. He had a lot to say, but he knew how it would begin. Why is your immune system so aggressive? And the answer that changed everything. We don't like invaders. It was awkward, but they clasped forearms in the human fashion. Tyranu didn't have wrists, but Ver had practiced,